Got it working. That's just the typical disclosures. I am Deb Kegelmeyer, and I'll be talking about the research aspect, kind of the hardcore research elements, and Angelina will be coming up to talk about how we apply that in our everyday lives. And as we've already heard, I do have a grant currently with the HDSA, and we'll talk a little bit about that research as well. I wanted to start today being sure that we're all clear on terminology because it gets intermingled a lot, even by therapists and professionals like myself, and sometimes that can cause a little confusion. So wanted to get the terms physical activity, exercise, and physical therapy kind of really highlight what we mean by each of those. So physical activity is any bodily movement that you do, included in your normal activities. So anytime you're not sitting or sleeping, you're up moving around, doing the laundry, the housework, babysitting your grandchild, any of that stuff, that's physical activity. Exercise is a planned, structured activity. It's purposely focused on improving or maintaining some aspect of physical function. So something that you're purposefully trying to get stronger, more aerobic capacity, or improved balance. And physical therapy is performed by a licensed physical therapist, and it's performed in order to help you improve how your body performs physical movements and how you walk and balance and perform other functional activities. It gets commingled with exercise a lot because one of the primary modalities that we use is exercise. So you'll hear Angelina and I talk a lot about exercise and physical activity because those are two things that we use all the time. But in physical therapy, we may also use other techniques like something we call gait training to work on walking, balance training. We may work on improving functional activities. Sometimes we apply modalities like ice, heat, electrical stim, all kinds of things like that. So we're excited because if you go all the way back to 2010, which I'm a little embarrassed to say I was around and already working in the field, and we had virtually no studies in the area of physical therapy and exercise and Huntington's disease. And since that time, it has really grown exponentially to an extent where we were able to conduct a systematic review and really look at all of the studies that are out there to date and figure out what have they told us so far and what do we still need research on. And that was published in Neurology. So we were pretty excited to get something on Huntington's disease in that journal. And what did we find out? We found out that there's been a good amount of research, all with positive findings in the area of aerobic exercise. So people with Huntington's disease should do aerobic exercise. And we talk about a moderate intensity. That means that you're working hard enough that it's a little bit hard to talk, but not so hard that you can't get out a sentence and that you're like, oh my goodness, I'm working as hard as I can. But definitely getting your heart rate and your breathing up. And that'll improve fitness. It also improves motor function. And then one-on-one supervised walking training. So that's with a physical therapist where we work on how someone walks. So we're looking at maybe improving how big of a step you take, how fast you walk, balance during walking, how coordinated your walking is, things like that. There's been enough research in that area to say that that really works and we should be doing it. Now, these other areas, there were no negative studies. It's just that we don't have enough research out there yet to make those of us in the research area confident or happy enough to really say it's an absolute. But we definitely saw benefits with strengthening. Most of the trials that have been done combine strengthening and aerobics. So trying to make sure that everyone in the field doing the research are clinicians as well. So I know that we're all interested in making sure that we're giving our patients the best treatments. So strengthening with weights, whatever. Individualized exercises, including balance, are also something that can be helpful. It has some research behind it. We would like to see more. Balance training is something that often gets left out. So making sure that we're including that as a part of the program. And also breathing exercises. And I think this is something that people don't think about until they're having trouble breathing, which it's way too late. Everything we talk about takes work. We know that. There's no pill to get you in better physical shape, stronger, any of that. It's all work. And the best way to get ahead is to be in a place where you work to maintain what you have. Because once you lose function, get weaker, you can improve it, but that's a lot more work than just starting out early and maintaining. So doing breathing exercises, it's important. I had a patient the other day, I was promoting breathing exercises, and he said, "You have to be crazy. I am 77 and I have been breathing my whole life." So first of all, it's working. And second of all, what makes you think you can change it? And I said, well, I just think I can, okay. But we need to work on breathing in deep enough, expanding the rib cage, making sure we're fully inflating our lungs. It's going to help prevent aspiration, so swallowing food into the lungs, which can lead to pneumonia, and just filling up the lungs and getting them fully inflated all the time. Well, every time you take a breath helps to prevent pneumonia, which are really important things. So starting that early and being sure it's a part of the routine is very helpful rather than waiting until there's a big problem with it. I have to confess that I had some fairly major spinal surgery it's probably been 7 years ago now. But about 2 years or 3 years after that, I had imaging done, and an incidental finding on the imaging was that part of my left lung was not filling up. And I was not inflating that part of my lung, and I couldn't believe it. I said, I know what I'm doing. I was breathing right after that surgery, but it's pretty clear that the surgery and after that, when you don't want to breathe and everything hurts, is probably when I stopped. And then lo and behold, I had not started up again. So another rule, don't be your own therapist. It never works out well. I have so many excuses and I believe them all. A big study that was done, the Exert HD trial, this is one of the ones that's coming out of a lab in Wales, which they've done multiple really strong studies, particularly in the area of aerobics and strengthening. And they showed that exercise done 3 times a week for 12 weeks, as long as it includes aerobic exercise and resistance training, helped to improve motor function and fitness. And what you're going to see here and in all of the research is that it's done in people in early to middle stages of the disease. It doesn't mean that things don't work or can't work in late stage. It means that it's a difficult place for us as researchers to go. And we need to figure out a way to go there, but there's no studies right now that in the exercise realm that include late stage disease. But most therapists do exercise well into the late stage disease with their patients with Huntington's disease. Also notice the aerobic training's done on a bike. That's 100% been the case. So a stationary bike is what they've used in all of the studies looking at aerobics. Several studies have looked at just encouraging physical activity. So that's on that sit less, move more, whatever you enjoy doing or regularly do, let's do more of it. Let's try to work that up and just get people more active. These studies were looking at the fact that as physical therapists, we know that we tell people to do exercises all the time, and that all the time people come back and say they didn't do it. So this is like just our life every day is, no, I didn't do it. Or the person that's like, yeah, sure I did it. Oh, okay. So most of my patients are pretty honest, though. I had one gentleman who repeatedly brought back the exercise pamphlet I gave him. It was dog-eared and worn out. And I said, I'm so excited that you're doing it. And he goes, no, I read it every day. I said, that's really boring reading. I'd just rather you did the exercises on it. So we're looking at why don't people get involved in exercise? How can we get people more engaged? What are barriers to that? And that's what some of these studies were looking at. So some things to think about if you're having trouble getting started or keeping it up is, what are the challenges or the barriers that you personally are having? Because identifying those and then individually addressing those is one of the things that's helpful. Having a plan of action. I know that I need to hold myself accountable to a time of day, a certain day, someplace when I'm going to do it. Because if I just say, I'm going to do this 3 times a week, because that's what Deb said in the research studies, that there'll always be a tomorrow. And by the end of the week, I'll have done it 0. So having that, when am I going to do it? Where am I going to do it? What am I going to do? It helps to keep a record so you can see that you aren't keeping up with that plan. And then having those individualized goals and targets. What's your reason? What matters to you? Why do you want to do this? And that helps motivate. Because if there's not a reason, then it's very hard to get up and do it. So figuring out what it is you want to make better or maintain and what's important to you. I know recently I've been back in physical therapy because I have a granddaughter, and I wanted to be able to be sure that I could lift her up, throw her around, roll around on the floor with her, and I do. She seems to think I am more mobile than I am, but she wants me to somersault. I can log roll. Somersaulting, that is not happening anymore. It really helps to have a partner, to have someone that's involved, that's holding you accountable, and especially if they're doing it with you. But what we've found over and over again is that when anybody has a partner, some type of a care partner that's asking how they're doing with the exercise or doing it with them, that they're more likely to continue with that program. This is just a diagram that came out of those studies that says, you've got your pyramid, kind of like your food pyramid, real important, move more, sit less. So the first thing is to get out of the chair. And if you know me, I want you to get in and out of the chair 10 times in a row and then go wherever you're going. But standing up and sitting down can be a great exercise. Doing aerobic activities, because we know that that's had some really strong support. Enjoying recreational sports, whatever that is. Pickleball's the new biggie. But swimming, biking, hiking, anything. I always tell my patients, tell me what you like. We can make anything work. I had one lady challenge me. She played, it wasn't bridge, it was another game that you played with dice. And I said, I know that game, and I know it involves switching tables and candy at every table. And so, thus, the stand up and sit down multiple times before you go to the next table with the candy. Leisure activities, stretching. Stretching's important, but not nearly as important as the aerobics, balance, and strengthening. And then sit less. We will talk about the 4 pillars, so that's that aerobic. And as I mentioned, most of the studies have been looking at stationary bikes because that's easy for us as researchers, but really aerobics, boxing, I'm going to talk about a dance program, then resistance, it can be weights, it can be TheraBand, it can be your own body weight. Push-ups are using your own body weight to strengthen. Standing up and sitting down is a way of doing squats that's safe, that uses your own body weight. And then flexibility, stretching, just making sure that you're stretching out and maintaining that flexibility, and then balance. That's my area of research. I'm a big promoter of that. If all you're doing is cycling, riding a stationary bike, some of these things, you're not going to be challenging balance. Running on a treadmill does challenge balance, but I'll tell you that we did a treadmill study, and it's really, really hard if you have Huntington's disease to walk or run on a treadmill. It requires that your stepping be very regular, and in neurodegenerative diseases like Huntington's disease, the stepping gets variable, so it gets really challenging. Kayaking challenges the balance. Tai Chi, boxing, yoga, and dance are all good ways. And speaking of our study that the HDSA has been funding, which we're eternally grateful to, and we're eternally grateful to all the people that through COVID and everything else have come out and been in the study. Our lab at Ohio State does have a study that's just finishing up. We call it Move to Music or Move to Improve study. We changed it to Move to Music from dance because a lot of people said, that isn't dance, because it's not formal ballroom dancing or anything like that. It's kind of moving to music, just kind of having fun with the music. We have a professional dancer, and that's her with another dancer that videotaped the program for us. And I'm going to try to flip out of here and see it if we can. So we'll see if I can be tricky. Oh, that's not the one. I need to go. Oh, I gotta shrink this guy. What do you say to hit? No. There we go. At least you guys can see it. Oh, it's going to start me over again. Well, there'll be a clip back there. Miriam's going to come on and lecture everyone, unfortunately, on it, but there we go. So they do some seated, they do standing, they do all of that. We had people, it's videotaped, so we had people doing the dance exercises 2 to 3 times a week. And we did it for 12 weeks because most of the research shows that if you want to get exercise to become a habit, you should keep doing it for 12 weeks. You should commit to that. And then after 12 weeks, you'll probably find that you've gotten into the habit of it, that you've started to enjoy it and see the benefits. And so you'd be more likely to keep it up and do that. So that's what our program looks like. It's actually, we have it linked, but did we find out if people can get to our links?
Yet.
Okay, we haven't found out yet. We have links at the end, but we have our emails, so you can ask us at any time. You can email us, but we're opening that up now, and hopefully the YouTube channel will go public soon, but you're welcome to use that dance program. It is up on YouTube, but hard to find if you're not in our study. So I'll get them to stop. And now I need to go back to this guy. Where's my mouse? I just lost my mouse is all. There he is. It was just hiding from us. Oh.
I think if we like re-click.
There we go.
Yeah.
That should do it. So we don't have the data analyzed yet from the study, but I do have a case study, and it was a 59-year-old male that did it with his care partner, who was his wife, and they did the program for 12 weeks, And he did improve in motor function, which was shown on the what we call the UHDRS. You probably do that when you visit the neurologist office. He got faster at standing up and sitting down 5 times, which was a nice functional improvement. And he showed improvements in balance in that he could stand on one leg longer, which is an important skill actually for climbing steps, going over curbs, just kind of overall balance. And kind of more surprisingly, but very importantly, the PHQ-9 is a depression scale, and he got much better on his depression scale. He said he liked it because it was easy, and he really, really liked dancing with his wife. They had a lot of fun. They were terrible dancers, and they laughed a lot. So apparently it involved a lot of giggling all of the time. They did feel like his balance was better, and he liked the fact that it was telehealth or online because he could fit it into his schedule when she was home from work. And he has a lot of anxiety about going out in public and especially exercising in public, so it worked well for him. And some of our other clients said that it was nice because they didn't have transportation maybe, or even lived out in rural areas in Ohio, so didn't have good access to group health. This is a kind of a repeat or summary slide on the research that one of the doctoral students made. So you can see here strong evidence for aerobics and gait training, and then what we call grade B evidence, but positive evidence for working on balance, breathing training, making sure we have caregivers involved, or care partners, and then also for transfer training for things like getting in and out of chairs and up and down off of the floor. And I am going to turn it over to Angelina now, who's going to tell us how to put all that into action.
Okay, so talking more about the application of exercise. All right, so Dr. Kegelmeyer shared some great reasons to exercise in HD. And I would also encourage you to think of your body as a whole, right? Your body is so much more than HD. There are so many other systems in our body that greatly benefit from exercise. Our muscles, our bones, your heart, your lungs, your circulation, all of those things greatly benefit from regular and consistent exercise. We've all heard the phrase, use it or lose it, right? And that's true in HD as well. But I also want you to remember the phrase, use it and improve it. I think a common misconception with HD is that people can't make changes or improvements. And that's absolutely not true, especially in those early or mid stages. If you're working on something and you're practicing something, you can see change. And I'm not saying that exercise can change the course of HD or prevent the progression of the disease over time, but you can see improvements in the tasks that you're working on. I also like to think of exercise in a condition like HD where there are so many variables that you can't control, right? There's so many things that are out of our control. But this is something tangible and something that you can really take control of, you can take ownership of. And that can be really powerful to think of exercise from that perspective. So the question is always, okay, so how much exercise do I need to do? So this is a summary. Deb talked about the 4 pillars of exercise. And this really is just a summary of approximately how much exercise you should do in each category. 3 to 5 times a week for 30 minutes for aerobic exercise, 2 to 3 times a week for strength training. And really that's a very broad range. And this is just an idea. For strength training, for someone who's already doing strengthening, that might be way too little. And for someone who is just starting out in strength training, and maybe that's not part of your routine now, that might be too much. So making sure that you are honoring where you're at and starting with in a feasible place and building from there. For balance and agility and for flexibility or stretching, that's 3 times up to daily. And that's a big range as well. So if you are someone who is doing balance to maintain their balance, 3 times a week might be enough. If you're someone who's having some balance difficulty, you might need to do that more frequently throughout your week. So it's really individual and specific. We also, in the concept of looking at our body as a whole, we want to remember that there are many other things that might affect your body that are not HD related. So you might have an orthopedic injury, you might have a prior back injury, and we want to address those things as well. This is a shameless plug for physical therapy. I think physical therapists are pretty cool, but you can always chat with your physical therapist in order to receive more specific or customized recommendations in these activities. So how hard to work? Typically for cardiovascular exercise, there are some calculations you could do to find a specific target heart rate, and that can get complicated. If you're a numbers person, that can work. But a good and easy way to determine how much to exert yourself is thinking of the perceived exertion scale, that 1 to 10 scale, where we're really aiming to get that moderate to vigorous intensity. So anywhere from that 4 to a 7. If you are working at max effort, a 10 out of 10, that is not sustainable for your 30 minutes. No one can do that, so you're working too hard. If you're working too light, I think of my dad, who I love very much, but he would go to the gym, and I could use quotes on that. He'd go to the gym, but he'd come home and his t-shirt would be like pristine, no wrinkles, no sweat. He was not working hard enough when he was doing his exercise. So this is really just a way for you to gauge how hard you're working. So specific recommendations for each stage of HD, knowing that the way you exercise and the importance of exercise in different categories will shift and change throughout the stages of HD. So knowing what to expect is important. So before symptom onset or early in symptom onset, the main goals of your exercise program is to establish a program, to develop those habits, to develop a routine, and really get in the habit of having this be part of your day, part of your week. We want to maintain or even promote improvement in the areas that you're working on. And if you are having symptoms, we're looking to even change or improve those symptoms. And the big goal is to start early. Try not to wait until a problem arises. Really use exercise as a way of prevention. Some tips for success, and as Deb already mentioned, plan your exercise into your week. If it's within your week already, you're much more likely to be consistent with it. Finding things that you enjoy is crucial, and getting your family and friends involved can be really fun. You can do anything at this stage that interests you, so make sure that you use your hobbies, use things that you enjoy. You can exercise on your own. Independent exercise is okay, but doing it in a group or a class might be more fun and engaging. And online videos are an option. So exercise for the early stages, I won't go through these pillars completely. Deb already described activities you can do in each of these categories, but the main take home here is that nothing's off limit. Anything that you enjoy doing can work for these categories of movement. In those early stages, you can also participate in something called dual tasking. And that's a fancy way of saying doing two things at one time. And during our day, we are constantly dual tasking. We are constantly doing multiple things. We're walking and talking, or we're making dinner and we're thinking about something else at the same time. So in order to challenge that and to make sure we're still able to do those dual tasks, you can practice dual tasking. So that would be doing a form of exercise, and the example is standing on a foam pad on one foot, and the dual task can be a motor dual task, such as also throwing and catching a ball. The dual task can alternatively be a cognitive dual task, where you are doing something that challenges your brain. So thinking of names that start with the letter A through the alphabet and going through the letters of the alphabet, or counting backward by a set number. If you want to get really fancy, you could do all three things at the same time. The important thing with dual tasking is that the original task isn't already too challenging. So if you're already having a difficult time standing on one leg on a foam pad, don't add a dual task into that exercise. Add a dual task into something else. So moving forward to exercise in the mid stage of HD, we still want to continue the routine. We want to continue our plan of exercising, but we want to modify it as needed. We might start to need some assistance or help with exercise, so knowing how to adapt is important. We want to make sure that we're maintaining the respiratory muscles and making sure we're able to take those deep inhales, those deep exhales for our lung health. And we're monitoring for weight change. At this stage, weight can fluctuate in either direction. Some people experience weight gain if they're just not being as active or moving as often. And other people experience weight loss if they're having multiple reasons for causing weight loss, such as chewing or swallowing difficulties or additional movements or changes in metabolism. So tips for success at the mid stage are just acknowledging that you might have to have some assistance with your routine. And that could be due to physical changes or cognitive changes. From a physical standpoint, if you are not as stable while doing your exercises or balancing, you might need someone to stand near you and guard you. And from the cognitive standpoint, those exercise sheets or handouts or videos you used to follow without difficulty, you might start to have a hard time following them. So you might need some assistance with knowing what to do or how to do it. Independent exercise is still okay if it's going well for you, but guided exercise might be necessary at this point, and also might be a lot more motivating and engaging. Exercise videos are still okay, but again, you might need someone to help lead you through the exercise. So some examples of what this might look like in this mid-stage. For cardiovascular exercise, if your balance becomes difficult, still challenging your heart and getting your heart rate elevated, but maybe doing it from a seated position instead of a standing position. So a recumbent bicycle can be one option. You also might still choose to do walking as your cardiovascular exercise, but maybe you have someone that goes with you, or maybe you start to use an assistive device when you're walking. Strength training, the big difference here is that you can still use weights and resistance, but if you are someone who has a lot of chorea, a lot of uncontrolled movement, you don't want to lift heavy weights above your head, right? That can be a recipe for disaster. So we want to move in transition to using machines or bands or fixed forms of resistance, or just using body weight for your strength training. For your balance and agility, you might need someone to guard you. So you might need someone to stand by so you have that backup plan if you're not, for this category, we're putting you into positions where you're having to challenge your balance. And we certainly don't want you to fall while practicing your balance. So having someone, a family member or a caregiver, stand nearby might be beneficial. Or standing near a wall or a countertop to ensure we have that backup plan. You can still work on dual tasking, but at this stage it also might become really challenging to perform dual tasking. So knowing that you might have to modify those activities. And stretching and flexibility, if balance comes into play, you might have to sit or consider chair yoga versus standing yoga or stretching. And definitely here, you'd want to consult with a physical therapist if you are having changes to your walking, changes to your balance, and especially if you are starting to experience falls. Other functional tasks that are great to practice in that stage are things that we don't traditionally think of as exercise or challenging our body, but the ability to get down onto the floor and safely get back up from the floor is very important. Falls happen, and having the ability to recover from the fall is important. And it does require a certain amount of strength and coordination and flexibility. Deb had already mentioned, but practicing standing up and sitting down is a great task to do to help strengthen your body, and it's also very functional for situations where you're needing to get onto and off of a toilet seat or a low sofa seat. So having the control and the strength to do that is crucial. So moving forward into the late stage of HD, your exercise is going to change a lot in this stage, and your goals will shift to performing more, participating in daily activities. We're still trying to preserve or maintain independence as much as possible, and of course trying to still maintain muscle strength to do your daily tasks. We're also looking to prevent issues with your skin. So we don't want skin to break down if we're sitting for longer periods of time or spending longer periods of time in bed. And it's really important for the person with HD and any of their care partners to be trained on any equipment that they're using and how they're moving their body. So some tips for success are just knowing that you're going to need assistance at this stage, and that's okay. Some support from a caregiver or care partner will be needed, and in some cases, the caregiver or care partner will be helping you move your body, and that's in an active assisted way where you are doing as much as you can, but the caregiver is also helping to create the movement. And here we'd also want to remember to consult your rehab team. Rehab can be really important at this stage to know what is important to focus on and where the focus should be. You might not need exercise from all 4 pillars at this point, and likely you won't have capacity or time to do that. So having your physical therapist and possibly occupational therapist and speech therapist give you more guidance can be really helpful. Here are some examples of what each what each category may look like. So for aerobic exercise, a seated peddler is a good option. And the reason we choose the seated peddler versus a recumbent bike, a bike that you sit on, is you don't have to transfer. So the peddler is something that is portable. You can pull it right up in front of wherever the person is sitting, and they can do their exercise. Or you can put the peddler on a table and they could use their arms to do the peddler. Walking, if that is still an option for you, is an option. We kind of shift the focus to therapeutic walking, where someone is just walking to get some steps, get some movement and exercise. An assistive device might be really challenging to use at this stage, so likely the walking might be hand in hand where someone's holding onto you. Strength training at this point would be likely body weight only, and it might look a lot different. So just rolling your body from your back to lying on your side, or lifting your hips up when you're lying down on your back to bridge your hips. And all of those things help to keep your muscles moving in a functional way so you can still do the activities you need to do, such as getting dressed or using the bathroom. For balance, we might do seated balance. So sitting in a chair, maybe without back support, that can be a challenge at this stage, and that works our core muscles. If that is too difficult, you might do things from a lying down position. And if someone is able to sit, they might engage in chair yoga. And similarly for flexibility, chair yoga or stretching in a seated or lying down position are options. So moving on to motivation and consistency, and we've touched upon this a little bit already, but the big goals are setting yourself up for success. So starting small and building over time. If you go out tomorrow and you grab your sweatband and your free weights and you say, I'm doing all 4 pillars of exercise, you're probably going to be exhausted, and it's probably not going to be sustainable, and you're probably not going to be able to keep up with that routine. So starting small, you might start with taking a short walk, a 5-minute walk a few times a week. That's fantastic. That's where you should start. Making sure that you're being realistic with where you're at now and realistic with what time you have. Making sure you celebrate your accomplishments. So give yourself kudos. You deserve it. If you've been keeping track of your progress and you're being consistent, have a way to celebrate that. Have an incentive. Have a goal with your partner, your family of, we're going to do something special to celebrate that I've accomplished this goal. Having a form of accountability is really helpful. So having that either group class or friend or a person who checks in and kind of holds you to that goal to maintain your exercise. And one thing I really like to encourage is sometimes we're not great at doing things with the focus on ourselves, but with HD, you likely know many other people who also have HD. So you can think of this as you're acting as a motivator or a good example for other people in your life. And sometimes that can be motivating to know that you're doing that to be a good example for them. And again, include your hobbies. So make it fun. It should feel more like a hobby and not a chore. So recommendations for consistency, we've said it before, but get it on the calendar, plan ahead. Exercise when you have the most energy. If you are not a morning person, don't plan your exercise for the morning. Try to find the time of day that works best for you. Exercising at the same time each day, once you find that time that works best for you, try to keep it consistent. If it's on your day and it's part of your day, it's more likely to happen. You kind of fall into that routine and that structure, and that tends to be helpful. Okay, so we'll all be incredibly consistent and nothing will ever go wrong with that plan, right? So the reality of this is, you're probably receiving so many recommendations, right? You receive recommendations from your neurologist, your primary care, your physical therapist, maybe your OT and your speech therapist, maybe your neuropsychologist, and that's a lot, and that's just bundled for HD. You might also have a cardiologist or an orthopedic doctor, and these recommendations can get really overwhelming. Combined with other family obligations or other things that might be going on. So know that prioritizing is important. And while exercise should be a priority, it might not be your number one priority. And it might not be even in your top 5 right now. So prioritize for you what is most important right now and include activity in as you can. And when you're able to, then you can develop your routine. Now, if you're someone who already has a routine and you're already exercising, good job, keep it up. But one of the goals or one of the things to note is that you're going to get off track at some point. Things happen and life happens, and that's okay. So honoring that and knowing that we all get off track. I hit my snooze button this morning. Don't tell anyone, but I did not do my exercise this morning. I slept in. So it's going to happen, and just knowing that when you can get back into your routine. I've heard people say before, well, it's been a month or it's been 6 months, I can't do that anymore. No matter how much time it's been, if you're now in a place where you're able to make this a priority, get back into your routine, but remember to start small again. Use those tools for success and try not to start too big. Start small and feasible. And keeping in mind, you can always take it back to the basics for more movement. Stand more, sit less. So there's some resources that we wanted to share with you. And first is seeing your physical therapist or your rehabilitation team. This links to the article that Deb had explained on exercise in HD. So if your physical therapist is not familiar with HD, that's okay. You can provide them this resource or provide them with our email addresses. And that's one of our passions, is helping to spread the word about the role of physical therapy in helping people with HD. HDSA has an on-demand self-care suite where they have other videos on exercise in HD. And Deb's video for Move to Improve is linked there as well. And don't forget about local gyms or community fitness centers. And I also encourage you to look into adaptive sports. Adaptive sports, there's links for Oregon and Washington, but in any state, adaptive sports can be really fantastic and help you do some really fun activities. So that's what we've got for you today. Keep in mind the 4 pillars of exercise. Start early. Don't wait until a problem arises. Make it your own and find what works for you. And your rehab team is there to help you and spread the word on what you've learned and to your family and your community. So we thank you so much, and please, we welcome any questions, and please don't hesitate to use our emails as well.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. We do have some time for questions if anyone has some.
You mentioned some breathing exercises or things like that. Obviously, we all know biking and hiking and stuff. But what are some specific breathing exercises, and are there resources to find those somewhere?
So some of the simple forms of breathing exercises are working on breathing and using all parts of our lungs. So we call it diaphragmatic breathing, like breathing deep into our belly space. And there are techniques and strategies to help train that breathing strategy. And sometimes there are things that you don't traditionally think of as exercise, but deep inhales in, deep exhales out, and there are ways to kind of self-assess and see. One is placing your hand on your stomach and your hand on your chest and seeing where is this coming from. If it's just coming from your chest, then you're not necessarily breathing using the diaphragm or those lower lobes of your lungs. So that's one of the basic ways you can train that. Another is lying down on your back and placing like a tissue box on your belly and trying to breathe so that the tissue box raises and lowers. There are fancier ways of retraining breathing. So there are different devices and spirometers that help to actually train the inhale and the exhale. And then there are other totally off the wall clinic games that we'll sometimes play where we'll have someone like use a straw and have like half of a cotton ball or like the little fuzzy crafting supplies where you're like inhale and suck in and try to like lift the cotton ball and place it somewhere else, or have little racing games where you're exhaling and blowing the little cotton ball across the table. So all of those things help to increase both the inhale and the exhale for the lungs. You might have any other resources.
I think that covered most of them. Also trying to make sure you're expanding your chest out to the side, putting your hands on your chest and doing that. And, as I mentioned, sometimes a visit or two to the therapist to have them work and really make sure it's individualized to the person and what they need to practice. They need to practice their coughing, things like that.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I think our speakers will be here for a couple more minutes if anybody wants to come up and say hello or ask any final questions. Otherwise, thank you all so much for being here.